So tensions are high yet again here on the peninsula, with North Korea now threatening to blow up roads connected to South Korea. What's behind the regime's hostile behavior? Let's turn to Professor Brian Myers for more. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, North Korea's threats on Monday came just days after the North warned they would cut off all inter-Korean roads and railways. Professor Myers, why such a dramatic development here on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, it's apparently because of the drones which the North Koreans accuse the South Koreans of having sent into North Korean airspace. When North Korean drones came into South Korean airspace in 2022, that was perceived as a big humiliation to the South Korean military. But North Korea is a military-first state. The North Korean regime derives, I think, the bulk of its legitimation from the perception of its military strength. So South Korean drone incursions into North Korea pose, I think, an even greater threat to the legitimacy of the North Korean state. So it's responding with this very tense and belligerent rhetoric.
And North Korea issued a directive to its artillery units near the border to be fully on standby to shoot. The question is, how likely is it that the North will actually go ahead with such a provocative act?
Well, we had even more tension and even more belligerence in the spring of 2013. And in the end, nothing really happened. So I wouldn't ascribe too much importance to this directive. After all, the two Koreas are still formally at war. So troops along the DMZ are generally on a higher state of alert than border troops in most other parts of the world. Also, North Korea is supplying weapons and maybe even soldiers to Russia's war effort in Ukraine. So I doubt that Kim wants big trouble with South Korea right now. On the other hand, as I say, this is a big embarrassment for the North Korean military. The North Korean people are led to believe that the rest of the world is quaking in fear of their country. So this poses a serious challenge to the regime that it probably won't take lying down. I think we'll see an escalation of some sort, but probably not an outbreak of real hostilities.
Well, what we have to note here is that local experts are actually questioning the origin of these drones that flew over the border, saying they actually belong to North Korea. Professor Myers, what's your take on this?
I'm a bit skeptical that the South Korean military would have sent the drones, because that would have required some sort of approval from the US military, which I doubt that the Americans would have given. I'm inclined to think it was South Korean NGOs, but I'm actually more skeptical of the notion that this is just something that the North Koreans have done themselves to create tension. That reminds me a little bit of the notion that it was the Russians who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, when in fact it turned out to be NATO after all. I think the drones probably did come from South Korea, but what I find strange is that North Korea decided to make such a big public fuss about this. If this was such a big embarrassment, and I think it was, you have to wonder why North Korea wants to draw so much attention to what is really a security failure on the Kim regime's part.
And, before these drones came, there were trash-carrying balloons from the North, in a retaliatory move against the same move staged by North Korean defectors here in South Korea. Does that mean there is a chance of the North flying drones to South Korea as well? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an option. We've had a few North Korean drone incursions already, as I said,
Right.
and that did have a good political effect from the North Koreans' perspective. So I think this is an option that Kim Jong-un might resort to. If it comes to drone wars, battles between drones going back and forth, I think the North is more likely to win, because it's easier for North Korea to shoot down drones on the relatively long flight to Pyongyang, much of which is quite sparsely populated, than it will be for South Korea to shoot down drones over Seoul. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I think it would be a kind of a logical form of escalation from the North's perspective.
Professor Myers, before I let you go, what's also notable is that South Korea's military first denied flying the balloons, but later added that the military can't really confirm it happened. What is it that Seoul is trying to do? Trying to confuse Pyongyang?
Well, militaries like to preserve strategic ambiguity. It's always better to keep your adversary guessing, after all. In this particular case, I think either a formal denial or a formal confirmation would have been problematic. Denial would have meant that South Korean NGOs sent the drones, and that would have put the government here under pressure to stop that kind of activity. As for formal confirmation, that might well escalate the situation further. So regardless of who actually sent the drones, I think ambiguity was probably the wisest course of action here.
Alrighty, Professor Myers, thank you so much for your insights. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.